The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm golden hue over the neatly manicured lawns of our quiet neighborhood. It was a picturesque setting, one that I had come to cherish since moving into my home 3 years ago. But beneath the surface of this idyllic community lurked an unexpected conflict that would soon turn my life upside down. It all began with an innocuous letter from the Homeowners Association. Initially, I thought it was just the usual correspondence about community events or reminders to keep our gardens tidy. However, as I flipped through its pages, my heart sank. The HOA accused me of encroaching on common land. They claimed that a portion of my backyard actually belonged to them. The letter stated that if I did not comply with their demands to remove my fence and any structures from the disputed area, I would face legal action. The notion that an organization I had relied on for support would attempt to take away what was rightfully mine felt surreal. My backyard wasn't just a patch of grass. It was where my children played, where barbecues were held, and where I found solace after long days at work. Feeling blindsided, I reached out to my neighbors for insight. Some supported me, while others suggested that the HOA often flexed their authority for trivial reasons. As days turned into weeks, the relentless pressure from the HOA began to wear on me. Their representatives were assertive and unyielding, insisting that homeowners must adhere strictly to the association's rules that seemed increasingly draconian in light of my situation. The safety net I once felt in this community slowly transformed into a web of anxiety and frustration. It became clear. If I wanted to protect my home and my land, I would have to stand up against the organization meant to support us. Thus began my journey toward confrontation, a battle for my rights that would lead me straight into the courtroom. To fully understand the gravity of the situation, it's essential to reflect on my property's background. When I first stumbled upon this house, it felt like a hidden gem nestled within the lush greenery of our neighborhood. The home was a charming two-story structure with an inviting front porch and a sprawling backyard that seemed perfect for family gatherings and weekend barbecues. It was here that I envisioned my children playing freely and creating memories that would last a lifetime. The property came with its own unique history. Originally built in the late 1990s, it was part of a development designed to foster a sense of community among its residents. Each home had specific boundaries outlined in detailed property deeds, which clearly defined ownership and common areas. My backyard, bordered by a quaint wooden fence, was well within those lines, or so I believed. As I settled into my new life, I took pride in maintaining my yard, planting flowers, and setting up a small vegetable garden. The fence that now stood between my property and what the HOA claimed was common land had been erected long before I moved in. This fence not only provided privacy, but also served as a boundary marker that helped me feel secure in my ownership. However, the HOA's sudden claim on that land turned my sense of security into confusion and anxiety. To make matters worse, the association's governing documents were filled with convoluted language regarding property lines and common areas. It took considerable effort to decipher what exactly constituted shared land versus privately owned space. As I began digging through old surveys and deeds, seeking clarity on the rightful boundaries of my property, I realized just how complex this battle would become. What started as an innocent misunderstanding was rapidly evolving into a conflict that would challenge everything I thought I knew about homeownership and community living. A few days after receiving the HOA's letter, I found myself sitting at my dining table, staring at the envelope as if it were a snake ready to strike. The initial shock had worn off, replaced with a growing sense of urgency to comprehend the association's complaints. I replayed the words in my mind, encroaching on common land, and each time it felt like a personal attack on my home and my family. The first meeting with the HOA was scheduled for that Friday evening. I arrived early, hoping to gather my thoughts, but the tension in the air was palpable as other homeowners filed in. The room was filled with familiar faces, yet they felt strangely distant, as if our shared lives were now overshadowed by this looming dispute. As the meeting commenced, the HOA president addressed the attendees with an air of authority that left little room for dissent. He outlined what he called the facts, claiming my backyard encroached upon a designated common area intended for community use. He spoke of safety concerns and property values, painting a vivid picture that suggested I was a transgressor harming our neighborhood's integrity. My heart raced as I listened to their accusations. It was surreal to hear someone label my family's sanctuary as an intrusion. As several board members chimed in, their words echoed in my ears. The fence I thought was a clear boundary had become a symbol of conflict. Each comment fueled my resolve, but also deepened my frustration. When it was finally my turn to speak, I felt both empowered and vulnerable. I explained my understanding of the property lines and presented the documentation supporting my ownership. But as I looked around the room, I could see skepticism etched on some faces. Doubt lingered like a shadow over their judgment. The meeting ended with no resolution, only more questions and an unmistakable animosity from the HOA. That night, as I lay awake pondering my next steps, I knew this battle was far from over. What had begun as an innocent misunderstanding had now escalated into a full-blown confrontation that would require careful planning and unwavering determination on my part. In the days following the meeting, the atmosphere in my home shifted dramatically. The tension that hung in the air felt almost suffocating, a constant reminder of the conflict with the HOA. I was determined to maintain a sense of normalcy for my family, but every interaction seemed clouded by the looming threat of losing our cherished backyard. The HOA continued to escalate their claims. A few days after our meeting, I received yet another letter, this time emphasizing potential legal repercussions if I did not comply with their demands. The tone was far more aggressive than before, filled with legal jargon designed to intimidate. I felt as though they were trying to wear me down with their relentless tactics. To make matters worse, I began receiving unsettling comments from neighbors who previously had been friendly. Some had heard about the dispute and expressed their concerns over how it might affect property values. Others whispered doubts about my ownership and questioned whether I was indeed encroaching on common land. Their change in attitude stung more than the HOA's accusations. It felt as if my entire community was turning against me. In an effort to gather support, I organized an informal gathering at my house. Inviting trusted neighbors made apprehension curl in my stomach, but I needed allies. As we sat around my dining table, I laid out the facts and shared my documentation. To my relief, a few voiced their understanding and promised to stand by me should this issue escalate further. But just as hope began to flicker in the darkest corner of my mind, I received a call from a lawyer representing the HOA. The message was clear. Prossimi step 4, they were fully committed to pursuing legal action if I did not comply immediately. The weight of reality settled heavily on me. I was no longer just fighting for my property. I was preparing for an all-out battle against an entity that wielded considerable power within our community. With each passing day, it became obvious that this fight would demand everything I had: patience, resilience, and unwavering determination to protect what was rightfully mine. The heartache and stress mounted as my resolve solidified. If they wanted a confrontation, they would get one. With the weight of the HOA's threats hanging over me, I knew that knowledge would be my most powerful weapon in this fight. I dove headfirst into legal research, spending countless hours poring over property laws, HOA regulations, and past cases involving similar disputes. My laptop became my constant companion, the screen glowing late into the night as I navigated through online resources and legal databases. I discovered that property rights can be a tangled web, often riddled with nuances that vary by state and community. My initial sense of confidence began to wane as I encountered complex terminology and legal precedents that felt foreign to me. However, this challenge only fueled my determination to learn everything I could. I printed out documents, highlighted critical sections, and created notes to help clarify my understanding. As part of my preparation, I also sought out local legal resources. I contacted a few attorneys who specialized in property law and consumer rights. Some offered free consultations, while others charged a fee for their services. Each conversation revealed more layers to the situation, beyond just property lines. There were implications regarding HOA bylaws and homeowners' rights that I had never considered. I quickly learned that the HOA had significant power over its residents, but also had to adhere to its own rules and regulations. This realization gave me some hope. If they were indeed acting outside their purview, perhaps I could leverage that in my defense. To bolster my case further, I decided to gather testimonies from neighbors who supported me. Their words could serve as character references and add weight to my claims of ownership. With each piece of evidence collected, surveys, emails, letters from friends, I felt more prepared for what lay ahead. The road ahead was daunting, but with every document reviewed and every conversation held, I transformed from a bewildered homeowner into a determined advocate for my rights. The battle against the HOA was no longer just a personal struggle. It had become a mission to safeguard not only my land, but also the integrity of homeownership within our community. As my resolve strengthened, the next step became clear. I had to gather concrete evidence to support my claims. I took inventory of everything that could bolster my case, focusing on documents, photographs, and testimonies that would illustrate my ownership and counter the HOA's accusations. First, I revisited the original property deed and old surveys. Dusting off the papers from the bottom of a filing cabinet, I examined each document with renewed scrutiny. The legal descriptions outlined clear boundaries that fell well within the limits designated for my property. I scanned these documents into PDF form, ensuring they were easily accessible for court use and potential presentations. Next, photographs proved invaluable. I decided to take detailed images of every corner of my backyard, including shots showing how the fence was positioned well within my property line. I snapped pictures of landmarks, like trees and posts, that indicated where my land started and ended. Additionally, I documented areas that the HOA claimed were common land, showcasing their unsightly condition while emphasizing their lack of use or access by any residents. Realizing that personal testimonies might carry weight in court, I reached out to supportive neighbors to ask if they could provide statements regarding my ownership and their interactions with the HOA. Some had lived in the community longer than I had and offered essential context about property delimitations and previous disputes involving the association. Their voices added credibility to my claims. I also sought to compile a timeline of events leading up to this conflict, listing when I received letters from the HOA, dates of meetings attended, and conversations with board members. This timeline served as a roadmap of sorts, a way for me to show how swiftly things escalated from amicable neighborly relations to heated confrontations. As days turned into more late nights filled with paperwork, anxiety began creeping in again. Each new piece of evidence felt like a small victory, yet it weighed heavily on me. The thrill of mounting preparation battled against an ever-present fear of losing what was rightfully mine. But amidst it all, there was a burgeoning sense of empowerment. I was transforming from a beleaguered homeowner into a prepared advocate ready to stand firm in court against those who sought to undermine my rights. After weeks of preparation, I reached a pivotal moment. It was time to file the lawsuit against the HOA. The decision felt monumental, a point of no return that would thrust me into a legal battle I had been preparing for but still feared. Standing in front of my computer, I took a deep breath and began drafting the complaint, pouring my frustrations and facts into every paragraph. I carefully outlined the nature of the dispute, citing the HOA's accusations and my evidence of ownership. Each claim I made was bolstered by documents I had gathered, property deeds, photographs, and testimonies from neighbors, creating a compelling narrative that highlighted not just my rights, but also how the HOA's actions were unjust. Once the paperwork was finalized, I sought legal advice to ensure everything was in order before submission. The attorney reviewed my complaint, offering constructive feedback and reassuring me that I had a strong case. With their guidance, I made a few adjustments and prepared to file in the local court. The day I walked into the courthouse was surreal. The imposing structure loomed above me, filled with echoes of past conflicts and resolutions. As I approached the clerk's desk to file my documents, a sense of determination surged within me. This was not merely about property lines. It was about standing up for myself and asserting my rights as a homeowner. Once filed, I felt an odd mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. The process had officially begun, but now I would have to wait for the HOA's response. Would they double down on their claims, or would they reconsider their position? Each passing day brought uncertainty, but I knew there was no turning back now. As I prepared for the next steps in this legal journey, I committed myself to remaining steadfast. This fight wasn't just for my home. It represented a larger struggle against unfair practices that could affect any homeowner in our community. Armed with knowledge, evidence, and newfound courage, I set out to face whatever came next, ready to defend what was rightfully mine in the eyes of the law. The day of the court hearing arrived, and a mix of emotions swirled within me: nervousness, anticipation, and an undercurrent of determination. As I entered the courtroom, the imposing atmosphere struck me: polished wood paneling, rows of seats lined with people, and the stern gaze of the judge at the front created a palpable sense of gravity. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was my moment to stand up for my rights. As I sat down at the plaintiff's table, I glanced toward the opposing side. The HOA representatives appeared confident, their attorney flipping through documents as if rehearsing for a performance. This was not just a fight over land. It felt like a clash between my personal narrative and their institutional power. When the proceedings began, the judge presided with authority, issuing instructions that underscored the seriousness of the matter at hand. The HOA attorney was first to speak, laying out their case with a practiced ease. They presented their interpretation of property lines and common areas, painting me as someone who had disregarded community guidelines. Hearing my backyard described as an illegal encroachment stung deeply. It felt surreal to have my home characterized as a violation. Then, it was my turn. With shaky hands but a resolute heart, I stepped forward to present my evidence. As I laid out the documented proof, the property deed, photographs showing my clearly defined boundaries, and supportive testimonies from neighbors, I could see nods of acknowledgement from the judge. With each point I made, my confidence grew. I explained how the HOA's actions had not only threatened my property, but also disrupted the harmony we all valued in our community. The questioning that followed was intense but fair. I answered each query with clarity and conviction. As I spoke about my dedication to maintaining my home and contributing positively to our neighborhood, I could feel the support of those who had come to witness the proceedings. Friends and sympathetic neighbors filled the back of the room, providing silent encouragement. As the hearing wrapped up, I left the courtroom feeling lighter, despite knowing that a decision would take time. Regardless of the outcome, I had stood firm in my beliefs and confronted what felt insurmountable. This experience transformed me from a homeowner intimidated by an organization into an empowered advocate for my rights, a realization that would stay with me long after this battle concluded. As the hearing progressed, I watched as the judge leaned forward, attentive to both sides. The HOA attorney had uniquely crafted their argument, portraying the association as guardians of community harmony. They emphasized the supposed threat my backyard posed to shared spaces and the integrity of our neighborhood. Each word they uttered twisted the narrative, driving home their points with authority. But I was ready for this moment. When it came time for me to present my case, I positioned myself at the front with determination radiating from within me. Holding my breath, I began by recounting my experience as a new homeowner who had embraced the community's values. I explained how I had treated my backyard not just as private space, but as an extension of my familial life, hosting birthday parties and cultivating a garden. I carefully walked through each piece of evidence I'd prepared. The property deed was first. My finger traced the outlined boundaries, reaffirming what my ownership rights were established as. Then, I presented photographs depicting how the fence clearly remained within these borders, conveying the reality over their claims of encroachment. With every image and document revealed, I could see heads nodding slightly in acknowledgement from those present in the courtroom, perhaps even some support from friendly faces in the gallery. Next, I introduced testimonies from neighbors who affirmed my responsible stewardship over my property and the lack of disruption to common areas. They painted a picture of my actions fostering community rather than threatening it. As questioning resumed, I remained focused, clarifying misunderstandings and articulating why keeping ownership of my land was crucial not just for me, but for all homeowners who valued fairness against a backdrop of unreasonable demands. The judge listened intently, occasionally taking notes. Though nerves bubbled underneath, each moment spent standing up for what was mine solidified my belief that this battle encompassed much more than property lines. It was about defending every homeowner's fundamental right to their space while keeping community bonds intact. Walking out of that courtroom felt invigorating, despite exhaustion creeping in. No matter what decision awaited us next, I'd firmly asserted my truth and fought hard for what was rightfully mine, a journey marking not just personal resilience, but advocacy for homeownership that others could rally behind too. The days following the court hearing felt like an eternity as I anxiously awaited the verdict. My mind raced with questions. What would the judge decide? Had my arguments truly resonated, or would the HOA's institutional might prevail? Each passing hour seemed to stretch time, amplifying both hope and dread. Then, the long-anticipated day arrived. I stepped into the courthouse once again, heart pounding with anticipation. As I took my seat, I scanned the room. Familiar faces of supportive neighbors and friends were present, lending their silent encouragement. The judge entered, and a wave of solemnity washed over the gallery as everyone stood in respect. Moments later, the judge called for order. With a composed demeanor, he acknowledged the complexity of the case and began explaining that he had carefully considered all evidence presented during the hearing. My pulse quickened as I leaned forward, focusing intently on his words. Finally, he addressed both parties directly. Having reviewed the documents and heard testimony from both sides, he said, "I find that you have indeed demonstrated your property boundaries clearly." A surge of relief surged through me as he continued, acknowledging how well I had articulated my ownership rights and the lack of encroachment on shared land. The judge ruled in my favor, stating that not only did I retain ownership of my backyard, but also emphasized that the HOA must adhere to its own regulations when making claims against homeowners. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a statement about fairness and transparency in our community. A wave of emotion washed over me, joy mingled with disbelief, as cheers erupted quietly from those gathered in support. While there was still much work ahead to rebuild trust within our neighborhood dynamics after this conflict, this ruling felt like a victory not just for myself, but for all homeowners fighting similar battles against overreach. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt transformed by this experience. A journey that had begun with fear had culminated in empowerment. No longer merely an anxious homeowner confronting decisions made behind closed doors, I had emerged as an advocate for my rights and a voice for community fairness. In the aftermath of the court decision, a wave of relief washed over me, but the journey was far from over. I returned home that day, not just as a victor, but as someone who had taken a stand against an organization that had threatened my sense of security. The ruling had reinforced my belief in the importance of homeowners' rights, but it also highlighted the need for vigilance in our community. As the news spread through the neighborhood, reactions varied. Many congratulated me, expressing support and relief that I had challenged the HOA's authority. Conversations shifted from whispers of doubt to discussions about fairness and shared ownership. It felt as though my battle had ignited a spark within some of my neighbors, encouraging them to reconsider their own interactions with the association. However, not everyone was pleased with the outcome. Some HOA board members confronted me, their faces tight with frustration. Though I maintained composure, their discontent was palpable, and it became clear that tensions lingered beneath the surface. I knew that rebuilding trust would take time and required deliberate effort on my part to engage constructively with those who once viewed me as an adversary. In the following weeks, I attended HOA meetings armed with my newfound confidence. Instead of merely participating as a resident, I began to voice concerns about transparency and inclusivity in how regulations were enforced. My goal was to foster a dialogue that would help heal divisions while ensuring that other homeowners felt empowered to speak up. I also started connecting with other residents who had faced similar struggles with the HOA, creating a support network where we could share experiences and strategies for navigating our rights. This collaboration brought us closer together and established a new sense of community solidarity. While my victory in court was significant, it became evident that my real challenge lay ahead, transforming not just my property rights, but also the dynamics within our neighborhood. Through this journey, I discovered that advocacy extends beyond individual battles. It encompasses collective efforts to ensure fairness and accountability for all homeowners. Embracing this role, I committed myself to fostering an environment where every voice mattered and every homeowner felt secure in their space. Reflecting on my journey, it became clear that this experience encapsulated much more than just a conflict over land. It highlighted the vital importance of homeowners' rights and the responsibility we all carry in our communities. My battle with the HOA served as a reminder that vigilance is essential to protect what we hold dear, not only for ourselves, but also for our neighbors. The ruling in my favor was a significant victory, yet it underscored broader implications for homeowners everywhere facing similar challenges. Many people in communities across the country may feel powerless against powerful associations or organizations that wield authority without accountability. Through my journey, I learned that knowledge is an invaluable tool. By understanding property laws and community regulations, we can better advocate for our rights. Moreover, I discovered the strength of solidarity among residents. By fostering open communication and support networks, we can transform individual struggles into collective movements. The initiative I started by engaging with fellow homeowners helped illuminate shared experiences, creating a community that stands together against any form of injustice. As I continued attending HOA meetings and contributing to discussions about fairness and transparency, I felt a sense of empowerment ripple through others as well. More residents began voicing their concerns, leading to more collaborative decision-making within our association. This evolution marked a shift from isolation and fear to an engaged community willing to advocate for its members' rights. Ultimately, my fight against the HOA taught me the importance of standing up for oneself and others. This journey reminded me that every homeowner deserves to feel secure in their space, free from unwarranted threats or harassment. Together, we can create a culture where accountability is upheld and constructive dialogue flourishes, a legacy that would outlast my personal struggle and serve future generations of homeowners in our community. Embracing this role as an advocate has become not just a part of who I am, but also a commitment to ensuring that all voices are heard and valued in the ongoing quest for fairness in homeownership.